Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going on a deep dive that might just blow your mind.
Yeah, you could say that.
We're looking at Libro del Placer, which translates to the Book of Pleasure.
By Austin Osman Spare.
Spare was this English artist occultist back in the early 1900s.
1913 to be exact.
Right, 1913. And this book is really something else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a guide to ecstasy,
It really is.
but not the kind you might be thinking of.
Definitely not your typical self-help book.
He goes so deep into the psychology of pleasure, religion, selfhood-like stuff that really makes you question everything you thought you knew.
It's a real head trip.
Yeah, and the source material is the book itself, so
If you're up for a challenge,
get ready.
yeah, buckle up.
So Spare, I mean, this guy was intense.
Mhm.
He takes these words we use all the time, like God,
Religion.
morality,
Mhm.
and he just completely flips them on their head.
It's like he's seeing them from another dimension.
Yeah, when I was reading this, I kept having to stop and be like, wait, is he even talking about the same things I'm thinking about?
You're not alone. I had the same reaction.
Because he's not using these terms in the traditional sense at all, right?
No, not at all. He saw them as tools.
Tools.
Ways to control desire, which he believed was the root of all suffering.
So he's saying these big concepts that we think are good, they're actually trapping us.
In a way, yeah. He felt they were leading to a kind of spiritual enslavement.
It's like instead of setting us free, they're actually boxing us in.
Exactly.
So how do we break free then? What's the alternative?
He calls it Kia.
Kia.
And it's this state of pure freedom. But it's not about doing certain things. It's more about an internal state
A way of being.
where your ego is completely unburdened by all these societal constructs.
It's like being in the zone, right, when you're creating something or playing sports and everything just clicks.
Exactly. That's what he's talking about, that feeling of flow.
And Spare is saying that's our natural state.
Yeah, our default setting.
But we get bogged down by all this baggage.
All the rules and expectations and beliefs.
And that's what prevents us from experiencing true pleasure.
Real freedom.
Yeah, and to get to that state, he introduces some pretty wild concepts. Like one that really stuck with me was auto-amour.
Which means self-love.
But again, not the typical self-care kind of thing.
No, Spare connected auto-amour with laughter.
Laughter.
He believed that laughter could bridge the gap between your individual ego and this sense of universal connection.
So it's like when you laugh, you tap into something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. It's a way to transcend our normal, limited sense of self.
That's fascinating. But then he also talks about reaching a state of exhaustion, which seems kind of opposite to joyful laughter.
Right. That's where it gets really interesting. For Spare to experience true ecstasy, you had to hit this point of complete emptiness.
Emptiness.
Like a void of desire. He called it exhaustion, and it's crucial to his whole philosophy.
So it's like you have to empty yourself completely to make room for something new.
Exactly. By getting rid of all those conscious desires that we're always focused on.
The things we think we want.
You become open to the desires of your subconscious.
And that's where Spare believes real power comes from.
The subconscious mind.
It's like clearing out all the clutter to find the real treasure hidden underneath.
That's a great analogy.
And then there's his views on religion. I mean, he doesn't hold back at all, does he?
Not at all. He was very critical of organized religion.
He basically says religions are trapping us in illusions.
With all their rules and talk of sin.
He thinks they're reinforcing this duality of good and evil.
Which he believed was the ultimate illusion.
And that's what prevents us from reaching true freedom and power.
Right. He felt that religions made us dependent rather than truly enlightened.
There's this one line that really hit me hard. He said, "I have not yet seen a man who is not God already."
That's a powerful one.
What was he getting at there?
It goes to the core of Spare's belief that we all have this inherent divinity inside of us.
We're all already God.
In a way, yes. He's saying it's already there, but we block it with all these belief systems and structures.
We put limitations on ourselves?
Exactly. We give our power away to something external when it's already within us.
It's like we're asking for permission when we already have the key.
That's a great way to put it.
And he's not a fan of traditional practices either, like prayer and ceremonial magic.
He rejected those outright. He saw them as just another way of relying on external forces.
Instead of tapping into our own power.
Exactly. For Spare, genuine enlightenment comes from within, not through rituals or dogma.
So it's like he's saying praying is asking for permission when we already have the power.
He wanted people to realize their own inherent power.
Now, one of the most mind-boggling ideas in the book is this neither principle.
Ah, yes. The neither.
That sounds so abstract.
It is. It refers to a state beyond duality,
Beyond good and evil.
beyond all our categories and concepts.
So it's like this ultimate state of being.
For Spare, it was the key to accessing your true self.
Is it like that feeling of being totally present in the moment without any judgment?
You're on the right track. He saw it as a return to a primal state of unity,
Where you're completely free.
where you completely escape the limits of your ego and experience true liberation.
It sounds almost terrifying, like a complete undoing of everything you thought you knew.
It can be, but for Spare, that undoing was essential to tap into our full potential.
And he actually proposed a technique to reach this state.
He called it the death posture.
Just the name gives me chills. And I have to admit, when I read about this, I wasn't sure if he was being literal or metaphorical.
Oh, he meant it literally.
He really did.
The death posture involves some very specific and intense physical contortions.
We're talking about physically exhausting yourself to reach this. Neither.
Neither. It's like a next-level spiritual workout,
So hold on, we're talking about like contorting your body in weird positions.
designed to push the body to its limits and induce a state of exhaustion.
Just to create that void.
A space where your ego dissolves and you can access primal knowledge and power.
It sounds intense.
It is. And this ties into his whole approach to magic, which is radically different from what most people imagine.
So not like waving wands and chanting spells.
Not at all. He wasn't talking about summoning spirits or anything like that.
Okay, so what was his magic about that?
Spare believed that everyone has these inherent magical abilities,
We're all magical.
but they're hidden within the subconscious.
So it's not about learning spells or rituals.
It's about tapping into this power that's already inside of us.
That sounds pretty intimidating, to be honest.
It can be, but it's also incredibly liberating.
But how do we actually tap into this subconscious power?
Well, he had a few techniques.
Besides the death posture.
Right, the death posture is definitely one of his more extreme methods,
I can imagine.
but the principle behind it is important.
Which is?
Pushing past your limits to access a deeper state of being.
So we need to kind of shake things up a bit.
Exactly. Disrupt those normal patterns of thinking and behaving.
And that's where his ideas about sigil magic come in, right?
Precisely.
Okay, so sigils are these personalized symbols you create,
Right, you charge them with energy.
and then you forget about them.
That's the key, the forgetting part.
That's the part that trips me up. How can you forget something you supposedly really want?
It seems counterintuitive, but that's the whole point.
So it's not about constantly obsessing over your desire,
No, it's about letting go of attachment.
trusting that something else will take over.
Exactly. Trusting your subconscious mind.
Because Spare believed that the conscious mind gets in the way.
With all its doubts and overthinking.
So sigils are about bypassing that mental chatter.
And tapping directly into the subconscious, which he considered a much more powerful creative force.
So you're basically planting a seed and then letting nature take its course.
A perfect analogy.
You don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing.
You trust the process.
And this approach can be applied to so much more than just material desires.
Absolutely. Think about overcoming fears, deepening relationships, discovering your life's purpose.
Okay, so it's about aligning your will with this subconscious power.
Exactly. It's like a collaboration between different parts of yourself.
And Spare believed that that kind of self-awareness was crucial for unlocking true freedom.
He even called his ultimate doctrine the practice of eternal self-love.
Eternal self-love. But again, not in the typical egotistical sense.
No, it's about radical self-acceptance.
Recognizing your inherent worth without needing external validation. That's powerful stuff. But I have to admit, some of his statements still throw me off.
Like,
He said there is no more loathsome sin than love.
that's definitely one of his more provocative claims.
It sounds so harsh.
It does. But remember, he wasn't talking about love in its purest form.
So what kind of love was he talking about?
The kind of love that's conditional possessive based on need and attachment.
The kind that leads to jealousy, heartbreak, suffering.
Exactly. He was warning against that kind of love.
So he's not saying we should reject love altogether.
No, he's saying we need to refine it, purify it.
Into something more authentic and sustainable.
Exactly. For Spare, eternal self-love was the foundation for a deeper, unconditional love.
The kind that doesn't seek to possess or control.
But simply allows another person to be fully themselves.
So it's about loving yourself first, fully and completely.
So you can then love others without that neediness or clinging.
Which often sabotages relationships.
Exactly. It's about moving from a place of lack to a place of abundance.
Where love flows freely without fear or the need to control.
Precisely. But even with this clarified definition of love, Spare's philosophy still pushes us to confront some uncomfortable truths.
About ourselves and the world.
It's not for the faint of heart.
He definitely doesn't sugarcoat things.
He doesn't, but his approach is all about radical self-discovery.
Embracing your full potential, even the messy parts.
And it demands courage and a willingness to question everything.
This is making me wonder, how did Spare himself live out these principles?
Did he achieve lasting happiness and freedom?
I mean, was his life all sunshine and roses?
That's a question that continues to spark debate.
So we don't really know.
Spare's life was anything but conventional.
He struggled.
He experienced poverty, faced rejection from the art world, dealt with personal struggles.
So it wasn't all bliss and enlightenment.
Not at all. But his writings do reflect this deep longing for freedom.
And this unwavering belief in the transformative power of self-love.
It's almost like he was always striving for that. Neither.
Neither. Even amidst the chaos of life.
Exactly. And that's what resonates with so many people.
He wasn't some enlightened guru who had it all figured out.
He was more like a fellow traveler.
Sharing his insights and methods.
For navigating this messy, complex journey of self-discovery.
So while we may never know the full story of Spare's personal life,
it's clear that his ideas continue to inspire.
Those seeking a more radical path to liberation.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of his work.
It's an ongoing invitation.
To step outside our comfort zones, confront our limitations, and explore the depths of our own being.
I'm starting to feel like we've just scratched the surface here.
We really have. There's so much more to explore.
I'm curious, for someone wanting to apply these principles to their own life,
where would they even begin?
I mean, this is pretty intense stuff.
That's a great question, and one we'll explore in our next segment.
Okay, so stay tuned.
We'll dive into some practical ways to integrate Spare's radical concepts into your own journey of self-discovery.
Okay, so we've gone pretty deep into Spare's world, explored all these intense concepts like Kia and auto-amor.
Not to mention the neither.
Either. Right. That one really blew my mind.
It's a lot to take in.
So now I'm thinking, how do we actually apply all this to our lives?
Yeah, where do we start?
It feels kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
I get that. It's a lot of information, but the good news is Spare didn't give us a rigid set of rules.
So it's not like a step-by-step guide.
More like a toolkit for self-exploration. He gave us these powerful concepts and techniques.
But we get to choose what works for us.
Exactly. You experiment, you find what resonates.
Okay, that makes me feel a bit better. But some of those techniques, like the death posture,
yeah, that one's pretty intense.
do we all need to be contorting ourselves to access this subconscious power?
Not necessarily. The death posture is definitely one of his more extreme methods.
I can see why.
But the principle behind it is important.
Which is,
Pushing yourself to exhaustion, to tap into deeper states of awareness.
so finding what works for you to quiet the mind.
Exactly. Think about things like intense exercise, deep meditation, creative activities that completely absorb you.
Anything that gets you out of your head.
And helps you move past those mental barriers and limitations.
It's like finding ways to disrupt those old patterns.
Shake things up a bit.
And that's where sigil magic comes in, right?
Exactly.
Creating those personalized symbols to manifest desires.
Harnessing the power of the subconscious.
It still feels a bit like magic to me.
I know it can. But the power of sigils is that they bypass the conscious mind.
With all its doubts and anxieties.
And tap directly into the subconscious, which is much more receptive to suggestion.
So you're basically planting a seed in fertile ground.
And letting it grow without constantly digging it up to check on it.
That forgetting part still blows my mind.
I know, it's counterintuitive.
But you're saying it's about trusting the process.
Releasing attachment. Allowing your subconscious to do its thing.
Because when we cling too tightly to a desire,
We create resistance.
it's like we're trying to force it.
But when we surrender control, we allow the natural flow of energy to work its magic.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But can sigil magic be used for more than just material things?
Like, what do you mean?
Can it help with personal growth or relationships?
Absolutely. The principle is the same. You identify your desire.
Whether it's overcoming a fear or strengthening a relationship.
Even finding your purpose. Whatever it may be.
Okay, so you create a sigil that represents that desire
Charge it with your energy and emotion, and then release it.
into the vast potential of the subconscious.
Exactly.
It's like using your imagination to program your mind.
In a way, yes. Spare believed that the subconscious was incredibly powerful.
And we can tap into that power.
If we know how.
But Spare also had some pretty unconventional views on morality.
He did. He talked about moving beyond good and evil.
Which is a bit unsettling, to be honest. How do we make ethical decisions if there are no clear guidelines?
That's where things get really challenging. Spare believed that we need to cultivate a deep sense of self-awareness.
So it's about trusting our own internal compass.
Exactly, rather than following external rules or dogma.
That takes a lot of courage.
It does. It's about developing a discerning awareness that helps you make choices aligned with your deepest values.
It's not about just doing whatever you want.
Absolutely. It's about taking responsibility for your actions.
It sounds like a constant process of self-reflection,
It is. Spare was all about questioning everything.
even our own assumptions and beliefs.
He believed that true freedom comes from a place of radical honesty with ourselves,
So the real journey is within.
not in seeking external validation.
Wow, this has been quite the deep dive.
It has. We've covered a lot of ground.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of Spare's work.
There's always more to discover
It's definitely something to ponder.
and explore further.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
It's been a pleasure diving into Spare's world with you.
And to you, our listener, keep exploring. Delve deeper into Spare's work experiment with his techniques.
See where this journey of self-discovery takes you.
You never know what you might uncover.
Remember, the path to true freedom is rarely straightforward.
And the most valuable treasures are often found within.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
And keep questioning everything.